I'm Jack Turner, a 45-year-old accountant from Oregon. Until today, my life had been just ordinary. I had a decent job, a steady paycheck, and a family I thought I could count on. But that was all an illusion, a life built on comfort and routine. Everything came crashing down when I got the call at work. It was a slow afternoon, the kind where you're half-heartedly clicking through spreadsheets, lost in the monotony, waiting for the clock to tick past 5. My phone rang. The name on the screen, Emily, flashed briefly before it cut off. I thought it was strange. Emily never called me at work. Then my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Emily's number this time. It was from an unknown caller. I hesitated, but picked up anyway. "Jack, old buddy," a man's voice greeted me, filled with the kind of smugness you can only get from someone who knows something you don't. "Who is this?" I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The voice didn't falter. "It's Chris. Chris Matthews. You remember me, don't you? I'm the guy you lost your wife to." I didn't need to think about it. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Chris Matthews. Emily's ex-boyfriend from college, the one who disappeared for years before showing up on our doorstep when we were first married, the one I had always wondered about, but never dared to confront. "Why are you using Emily's phone?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Where is she?" "Oh, she's around," Chris replied casually, as if this conversation were nothing more than a friendly catch-up. "We're having a little lunch, and then, one thing led to another, and now she's in the shower." My heart sank. I was speechless for a moment, too stunned to react. I tried to gather myself, but Chris's voice cut through the haze of confusion. "You want to hear something funny, Jack?" He paused for dramatic effect. "You know what she brought with her? A mini hairdryer. Can you believe that? A hairdryer for a casual lunch date. She planned this, Jack. She knew exactly what she was doing." I could feel the world tilt beneath me. The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. It all made sense now, the way Emily had become distant over the past few months, the way I'd caught her avoiding eye contact, hiding her phone, keeping secrets. I had been too blind to see it. "She told me she needed to freshen up before coming back to you," Chris continued, a sickening laugh in his voice. "She said she didn't want you to be upset." I barely heard the last few words. My mind was already spinning, everything from the last few years suddenly falling into place. The dinners where she would stare off into space, the way she seemed disconnected, the sudden urgency in her need to go out for errands that were always so vague. It had all been a lie. I snapped. "You have no right to call me," I muttered, almost shaking with anger. "Why are you telling me this?" "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You may be married to her, but deep down she's still mine. Always has been. Always will be. How does it feel to know she'll never love you the way she loves me?" I slammed the phone down without another word. My hands were trembling. My head was spinning. The reality of what had just been revealed to me was too much to bear. I had never felt so betrayed, so utterly crushed in my entire life. This wasn't just an affair, it was a dagger to my heart. I stared at the phone, my chest tightening with every breath. How had I not seen it? How had I let this happen? Within an hour, I packed up my things, withdrew all the money from our joint accounts, and moved everything into storage. I didn't call Emily. I didn't confront her. What was the point? I knew what I needed to do. I left without a word. No explanation. No dramatic confrontation. I just left. I drove for hours. There was no destination in mind, no plan, just the open road ahead of me, stretching into the unknown. It was the only thing that felt right. My mind was a mess, but I knew I couldn't go back to that house. Not now. Not after everything I had learned. As the miles passed and the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized I was not just running away from Emily. I was running away from the person I had become, the man who allowed his life to be defined by the facade of a happy family. But more than that, I was running towards something I couldn't yet define. Freedom? Maybe. Peace, perhaps. Or maybe just a way to keep breathing. The past few years had been nothing more than an illusion. Now I was free, and I didn't know where the road would take me. But I knew I wasn't going to find any answers by looking back. I didn't know how far I had driven before the weight of it all caught up with me. The endless road stretched on, the headlights cutting through the darkness, but my mind was a storm of fury, confusion, and heartache. I had to stop. I pulled off into a small, quiet rest area, barely noticing the empty parking lot or the shadows cast by the flickering light overhead. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the steering wheel, unable to think clearly. My hands gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, but I couldn't move. I didn't know where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do. Everything had unraveled so quickly, and now I was left with the echoes of a life that was no longer mine. I wanted to scream, to throw something. The anger burned inside me, but it wasn't the kind of rage that demanded action. It was hollow, sharp something that needed an outlet but had no way to escape. All I could do was sit there, alone, in the middle of nowhere. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew immediately it would be Emily. My chest tightened, the last remnants of calm slipping away. It was her. I could tell by the trembling in her voice before she even spoke. "Jack, please talk to me. I don't know what you heard, but you don't understand." I cut her off. "I understand perfectly well, Emily. Don't try to explain. Don't try to cover it up. I'm done. You've made your choice." There was silence on the other end, and I could almost feel her confusion, her shock at my coldness. "What do you mean? Where are you? We can fix this, please." "No," I snapped, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "You've already done enough. I can't fix this." "I won't. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I didn't need her apologies, her desperate pleas for forgiveness. What good would they do now? I had spent years ignoring the cracks in our marriage, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I had been the fool, and I couldn't undo that. I couldn't go back to the life I had built on lies and empty promises. As I drove, I realized how far I had drifted from everything familiar. No destination, no plan. It was like I was running away from myself, trying to escape the man I had been, but I didn't know who I was anymore or who I was supposed to be. My old life, my old self, felt like a stranger. It was a small town I ended up in. It didn't have much, just a few houses, an old diner, and a quiet road that led out to the mountains. I parked my car on the side of the road near an abandoned gas station. There was something about the solitude of the place that drew me in, something peaceful, even in the midst of the chaos inside me. That's when I met Henry Walker. He was sitting outside his farmhouse, a bottle of beer in one hand, a cigarette in the other. He looked like a man who had been living alone for a long time, someone who had seen enough of the world to know what mattered and what didn't. I didn't know it then, but meeting him would change everything. I walked over, not sure why I felt the pull to speak to him. He didn't look like he had any interest in small talk, but when he saw me, he gave me a nod as if he'd been expecting me. "You look like you could use a break," he said, his voice gravelly but calm. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Grab a seat, kid. I'm Henry. You look like you've been running for a while." I hesitated for a moment, but something about his words made me feel like I wasn't as alone as I thought. I sat down, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. I didn't know this man, but I could feel the weight of my life lifting just a little. "You want to talk about it?" Henry asked after a long silence. He didn't push me, just waited. I found myself telling him everything about Emily, about the affair, about how I was trying to run to escape, but how the pain wouldn't let go. Henry didn't interrupt. He just listened, and that was all I needed. "You know, kid," Henry said, his voice softening, "you've got to let it go. You can't outrun it forever, but you can find something else, something better." It sounded too simple, too easy, but something in his words hit me. Maybe I didn't need to run anymore. Maybe, just maybe, I needed to face what had happened, and then I needed to rebuild. The next few days passed in a blur. Henry offered me a place to stay on his farm, a small room above the barn. He had horses to care for, a few acres of land, and nothing but time to think, time to work, and time to let go of the past. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I had nowhere else to go, so I stayed. Henry showed me the ropes how to care for the horses, maintain the barn, and how to find peace in the rhythm of hard work. It was exhausting, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something real. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. I was living, and that's when I met Sophia. Sophia was Henry's granddaughter. She had come back to the farm after leaving her high-powered job in New York City. She had her own story, her own brokenness to deal with, but there was something about her that intrigued me. She wasn't like the women I had known. She was tough, but there was a vulnerability beneath her exterior. It was clear she had been through her own storm, and like me, she was trying to figure out what came next. She wasn't looking for comfort, and neither was I. But we began to talk about everything and about nothing. We shared our stories, our losses, and somewhere between the work and the quiet nights spent talking around the fire, something shifted. We weren't looking for a relationship, but it was impossible to deny the connection. I had been running from everything I knew, but here, in this place with these people, I was starting to understand that maybe the only way to heal was to stop running and face what I'd been avoiding all along. Sophia didn't know it yet, but she was about to change everything for me. Sophia looked at me for a moment, like she was thinking carefully about her words. Then she said, "Sometimes I wonder if we can ever truly heal after something hurts us so much." I looked back at her, surprised that she was being so honest. "Do you think we can?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the dark sky, where the stars were starting to show. Then, she turned back to me and gave a little smile. "I think maybe we can," she said softly. "But it takes time, and it's okay to take that time." Her words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in a while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could heal too. I didn't need to rush. Maybe I didn't need to fix everything right away. Maybe it was okay to just take things one day at a time. The next few days were quiet. I kept working on the farm with Henry and Sophia, and little by little, I started to feel better. It wasn't a sudden change, but it was a steady one. Each day I spent working with Sophia, I learned something new about myself. She wasn't trying to replace the past, and neither was I. We were both just trying to figure out how to live in the present. One day, as we were sitting on the porch again, after a long day of work, Sophia turned to me with a serious look on her face. "Jack," she said, "I know we've both been through a lot, and maybe we don't have all the answers yet, but do you think we could make it through this together?" I didn't have all the answers either, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe it was worth trying. "Yeah," I said, my voice a little stronger than before. "Maybe we can." And for the first time in months, I believed it. The days that followed felt different. They weren't filled with the same heavy weight that had been crushing me before. Working on the farm with Sophia and Henry became a routine that felt comforting, like a steady rhythm I could follow. Each task, feeding the horses, fixing the barn, or simply sitting in silence with Sophia, helped me let go of the past a little more. Sophia and I spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing. We'd laugh at silly things, share stories from our pasts, and sometimes just sit quietly, enjoying the peace. I noticed how much more relaxed she seemed too, as if the burden of her past was slowly lifting, just like mine. One evening, after we'd finished for the day, I sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Sophia came over, sat beside me. There was a calmness about her now, a gentleness that made me feel safe. We didn't need to talk at first. The silence between us felt comfortable, like we didn't have to fill it with words. After a few minutes, she spoke up, her voice soft but clear. "Jack, do you ever wonder what would happen if things were different? If the past hadn't happened?" I thought about it for a moment, my eyes still on the fading light. "Yeah, sometimes," I said slowly. "But I think if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have met you or had the chance to start over." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I feel the same way. It's hard to look back without wondering, but maybe what matters is what we do now, what we choose now." Her words sank in deeper than I expected. I hadn't thought about it that way before. What mattered wasn't the pain of the past or the mistakes I'd made, it was how I chose to live from this moment on. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't lost anymore. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I was moving forward. And maybe, just maybe, there was hope for something new, something real. We didn't talk much after that, but that was okay. Being with her, knowing we both understood each other's pain and where we were now, felt like enough. The next morning, as I walked out to the barn, Henry waved from his porch. He gave me a simple nod, like he knew things were starting to change for the better. I smiled back at him, feeling grateful for everything he had done for me. Without him, without this quiet farm, I wouldn't have found the peace I had. Sophia joined me later that morning, and we worked together like we had for days. But there was something different in the air, something lighter. Maybe we didn't have to fix everything, but we were healing, together, slowly but surely. And that was enough for now. As the days went on, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a sudden change, but a quiet transformation that happened slowly, like the seasons turning from winter to spring. The pain of the past didn't disappear overnight, but it started to feel less heavy, less like it was defining who I was. Sophia and I kept working side by side. There were moments when we'd laugh about something small, like a funny mishap with the horses or something silly that happened while fixing the barn. Other times, we'd just sit and watch the sunset, comfortable in the quiet understanding that we didn't need to say anything to feel understood. One afternoon, as we were finishing up some work in the barn, Sophia turned to me. Her expression was serious, like she had something important to say. "Jack," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking about something." I looked up at her, wiping the sweat from my brow. "What's on your mind?" She paused, taking a breath like she was choosing her words carefully. "I know we both have our pasts. We've both been hurt, betrayed. But I think we have a chance to build something different. Together, if you're willing." Her words caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting this. But as I looked at her, I saw the same uncertainty in her eyes that I felt in mine. We had both been broken, but maybe we didn't have to stay that way. "I'm not sure I'm ready for anything new," I admitted. "I don't want to rush into something because I'm scared or lonely." She nodded, understanding. "I get that. I'm not saying we have to figure it all out now, but maybe we could see where this goes. Take it one step at a time." Her honesty hit me in a way I hadn't expected. Maybe that was all I needed, someone who wasn't pushing, who was willing to go slow and see what happened without rushing to fill the emptiness we both felt. "I think I'd like that," I said quietly. Sophia smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that made my heart feel lighter. "We don't have to have all the answers," she said, "but we can start by just being here." Together. That evening, after a long day of work, we sat on the porch, the sky slowly darkening above us. The stars were starting to appear, one by one, just like the pieces of my life that were starting to come back together, little by little. We didn't talk much that night. We didn't need to. The simple act of being with someone who understood, who didn't ask for anything more than what we were, felt like enough. The road ahead wasn't clear. I still had a lot of healing to do, and so did Sophia. But in that moment, surrounded by the quiet of the farm, I felt like I was on the right path. I wasn't running anymore. I was finally ready to face what had happened, to let go of the past, and to see where this new chapter could take me. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to face it alone. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself settling into this new rhythm of life on the farm with Sophia and Henry. The work was hard, but it felt good. It felt real. For the first time in a long time, I woke up with purpose. Each day I was learning something new, not just about farm life, but about myself. Sophia and I spent more time together, talking and working side by side. She had a way of making the hard work feel easier, and I found myself looking forward to those moments with her. We never rushed things. We kept things simple, just two people sharing their experiences, slowly building something between us that was more than just friendship, but not yet anything else. There was no pressure, no expectations, just the quiet understanding that maybe this was the start of something real. One afternoon, Henry called me over while I was working near the barn. "Jack, come sit for a minute," he said with a grin, his eyes twinkling like he had something up his sleeve. "I've been meaning to ask you something." I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over to him, curious. "What's up?" He sat down on an old chair and gestured for me to join him. "You've been here for a while now," he began, his voice casual but serious. "You've put in the work, you've learned the ropes. You're not running from your past anymore. So I'm going to ask you straight, what's next for you?" The question surprised me. I had been so focused on surviving each day, on rebuilding my life, that I hadn't really thought about the future. "I don't know," I said, looking out at the land stretching before me. "I guess I've just been taking it one day at a time. I'm not really sure what comes next." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "That's all right, but maybe you should start thinking about it. You've got skills now, a place to stay, and people who care about you. Maybe it's time to stop running for good." I sat there, taking in his words. Henry had a way of speaking that made you stop and think. He was right. I didn't need to keep running anymore. I had found a place where I could finally start to heal and maybe even build something new. "I think you're right," I said, my voice a little stronger than before. "I'm ready to stop running." That evening, I went out to the porch where Sophia was sitting, looking at the stars. The air was cool, and the night was peaceful. She looked up when she heard me approach and smiled softly. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. I sat down beside her. "Yeah, I'm starting to figure some things out. I think I'm ready to stay here, to stop running from my past." Sophia's eyes softened, and she reached over to gently squeeze my hand. "I'm glad, Jack. You deserve peace." We sat together in silence, both of us feeling the weight of that moment. It wasn't the answer to everything, but it was a start. The past still hurt, and I knew I'd have to face it in time, but for now, I wasn't alone. And maybe that was enough. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling something new inside me, a sense of hope. I had a lot of work to do, both on the farm and with myself, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I just needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Sophia came out to the barn later that day. As we were getting the horses ready, we worked together, our hands moving with the familiar motions we had come to share. There was no rush, no hurry, just a quiet connection that had grown over the weeks we had spent together. As we stood by the fence, looking out at the mountains in the distance, I turned to her. "Sophia," I said, "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to see it with you." Her smile was the answer I needed, soft and genuine. "I think we'll figure it out," she said. "Together." And for the first time, I truly believed it. The months that followed were filled with change. I had stopped running, found purpose on the farm, and built a quiet life with Sophia and Henry. Yet, no matter how much I tried to let go of my past, it kept tugging at me. Emily's voice, the betrayal, the emptiness, it was all still there, in the background, a constant reminder of what I had once known. One day, out of nowhere, I received a letter in the mail. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but when I opened it, I saw the familiar name, Emily. Emily was asking for a divorce. She had gone through a lot of therapy, trying to understand the mess we had made of our lives. She said she regretted how everything had unfolded, but admitted that she couldn't live with the guilt of what she had done. She wrote that she needed to move on, to find herself and rebuild her own life, just like I was trying to do. Reading her words, I felt nothing at first. No anger, no sadness, just a cold emptiness. Maybe it was because I had already let go in my heart. Or maybe it was because deep down, I knew the divorce was the right thing for both of us. Our marriage had been built on lies, and neither of us knew how to fix what was broken. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sat quietly in my room, reflecting on everything. The hurt, the betrayal, the years spent together, and the years I had now spent, apart from her, rebuilding my life. I thought about the way things had ended, the way I had quietly walked away, choosing silence over confrontation, leaving behind a life I had thought I would always have. A week later, I signed the divorce papers. There was no ceremony, no dramatic conversation. I just signed, sealed the envelope, and sent it back. It was over. Sophia was there with me when I did it. She didn't ask questions, just held my hand, knowing that this part of my past had finally closed. For a long time, I had wondered if I would ever get over the pain of Emily's betrayal. But now, as I let the past go, I realized something. I didn't need to. With the divorce final, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and it was mine. I didn't have to live in the shadow of my old life anymore. I had found something new, something I could build without the weight of lies and broken promises. And in the quiet, in the space that was finally mine again, I realized that the most important thing was this: I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I truly understood what freedom felt like.